The storm raged outside Ravenhill Conservatory, rain hammering against the tall windows as Elena Whitmore hurried through the dimly lit corridors. Her sheet music, damp from the downpour, was pressed tightly to her chest. She was running late for her last class of the day when her phone vibrated in her pocket. Unknown caller. She hesitated, almost letting it go to voicemail. But something, some unshakable instinct, made her pick up. "Miss Whitmore, this is St. Mercy Hospital. Your father has suffered a severe heart attack." The world blurred. 20 minutes later, Elena stood frozen in the sterile hallway of the hospital, her abandoned sheet music resting on a plastic chair nearby. A doctor, eyes weary and voice heavy, delivered the words that shattered everything. Nathaniel Whitmore didn't make it. He was already gone before they arrived. 3 days passed in a haze. At Holloway Cemetery, Elena stood beside her mother, Catherine, whose fragile fingers clutched a cane. The illness was stealing more of her strength each day. On the other side, Theo, her 19-year-old brother, stared vacantly as their father's casket sank into the earth. The minister's voice droned on, but none of them truly heard it. Then from a distance, Elena felt a presence. A man stood watching, tall, poised, and dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that sharply contrasted with the autumnal landscape. "Who is that?" Theo murmured, following her gaze. Before she could answer, the stranger turned away and disappeared into the back seat of a sleek black car. A week after the funeral, the weight of grief was replaced by something colder: reality. 2 men arrived at their home, their tailored suits stiff with formality. They carried documents stamped with the bold insignia of Harrington Enterprises. "Your father was in debt to Mr. Harrington, $7 million to be exact," the older of the 2 men stated, sliding the paperwork onto their worn kitchen table. "The full amount is now due." "That's impossible," Catherine whispered, her voice fragile. Her hands trembled, more from shock than illness. "Nathaniel would never—" "Your husband falsified financial records, Mrs. Whitmore," the second man interjected. "We have indisputable proof." Elena's mind reeled. The medical bills were already suffocating them. Theo had only just started college, surviving on a partial scholarship. Losing their home, their security, everything seemed inevitable. "We don't have that kind of money," Elena said, forcing her voice to remain steady. The older lawyer nodded, as if he had expected this. Mr. Harrington anticipated that response. "He has an alternative solution." Another document was placed before her, thicker than the first. Elena hesitated, then glanced at the first page. Her stomach dropped. "A contract?" she murmured. But then she saw it, the clause that changed everything. "Marriage," the lawyer clarified. "Mr. Harrington is offering to clear the debt on the condition that you marry him. For a minimum of 1 year. No early termination. Once the term is complete, you'll be free to leave." His tone was cold, detached, as if this were nothing more than a business deal. "In addition," he continued, "he will cover your mother's medical expenses and ensure your brother's tuition is fully paid." Elena's pulse pounded in her ears. "Why?" she asked, though she wasn't sure if she wanted to hear the answer. The 2 men exchanged a glance. "Our client's reasoning is not our concern, Miss Whitmore. You have 24 hours to make a decision." After they left, Catherine broke down. "You can't do this, Elena. We'll find another way." But there was no other way. The house had already been remortgaged to pay for Catherine's treatments. Theo's education was barely holding on by a thread. Elena swallowed hard, pushing down the wave of panic threatening to rise. "I'll be okay, Mom," she said softly, though deep inside she wasn't sure if that was true. 1 year. That was what she kept telling herself. It's just 1 year. The next morning, Elena dialed the number the lawyers had left. By the afternoon, the papers were signed. By evening, she found herself standing at her father's grave, searching for answers that would never come. "Why, Dad?" she whispered, fingertips brushing the smooth marble. "What did you do?" The crunch of tires on gravel made her tense. A sleek black limousine had pulled onto the narrow cemetery road. The tinted back window lowered just enough for her to catch a glimpse of sharp, green-gray eyes watching her with attached, almost clinical calculation. Julian Harrington, the billionaire who now controlled her fate. Before she could react, the window slid back up, but the car remained, waiting. Her new life was about to begin, and it felt like walking straight into a gilded cage. Elena took a deep breath, resting her hand on her father's headstone one last time. "I'll find out the truth," she vowed. Then, lifting her chin despite the fear twisting inside her, she turned and walked toward the waiting limousine. The door opened from the inside. She slid onto the cool leather seat, coming face to face with Julian Harrington for the first time. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps mid-30s, with dark hair and a presence that filled the space effortlessly. But it was his eyes that unsettled her most. Calculating, detached, assessing her the way one might evaluate a business acquisition. "Miss Whitmore," he said smoothly, his voice even, controlled. "I trust the arrangements are to your satisfaction." It wasn't a question. Inside the suffocating confines of the limousine, the full weight of her decisions settled over her like a heavy cloak. But she refused to show weakness. "I'm doing this for my family, Mr. Harrington," she replied, holding his gaze. "Don't expect anything more." Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I expect exactly what is outlined in our contract," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. As the car pulled away from the cemetery, she turned to the window, watching her old life fade into the distance. But the questions wouldn't stop. Who was Julian Harrington to her father? And what was the true cost of this arrangement? The following afternoon, Elena stood in a sterile conference room on the top floor of Harrington Tower, overlooking the city skyline. She wore a simple white dress, one she had bought yesterday, alone. No family, no friends, just a justice of the peace, a handful of lawyers, and cold December sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Do you, Elena Whitmore, take Julian Harrington to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She swallowed hard. Julian stood beside her, his expression unreadable. Not once during the brief ceremony had he looked directly at her. "I do." The words felt hollow. The rest passed in a blur. Documents signed, rings exchanged. His fingers barely brushed hers as he slipped the simple platinum band onto her hand. Then, it was over. The justice pronounced them husband and wife, but Julian merely gave a curt nod before turning to his lead attorney. "Have the remaining documents sent to Lake Haven. We leave in 30 minutes. Elena blinked. Lake Haven? It was the first time she had addressed him directly since arriving. "My primary residence," he replied, glancing at his watch. "The jet is waiting." His dismissive tone sent irritation sparking through her, cutting through the lingering unease. "You might have mentioned that before now," she said coolly. That, at last, made him look at her. One brow arched slightly. "I assumed you understood that as my wife, you would be living in my home. The location is irrelevant." She clenched her fists at her sides. "My mother. Your mother's care has already been arranged," Julian interrupted. "A full-time nurse began this morning. Your brother's tuition has been covered through his graduation." He handed her a folder. "Details are inside, along with contact numbers. Shall we?" Elena exhaled slowly, steadying herself. 1 year. She had promised herself she could endure it. But as she followed him out of the building, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was no longer her own. Here's the rewritten version of Part 3, keeping the meaning intact but refining the language and style. An hour later, Elena sat in the lavish cabin of a private jet, watching the Oregon landscape shrink beneath the clouds. Across the aisle, Julian was immersed in work at a built-in desk, his focus locked on his laptop screen. She studied him in silence, the effortless precision in his movements, the unconscious way his fingers brushed the faint scar near his temple when he was deep in thought, the quiet authority he carried even when completely still. The cabin door opened, breaking her observation. A woman entered, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, her blonde hair pulled into a flawless chignon. She moved with polished efficiency, handing Julian a tablet as she leaned slightly toward him. "The Hong Kong investors are growing impatient," she informed him, her voice low but clear enough for Elena to hear. "Maxwell believes we should accept their terms." Julian didn't glance up. "Maxwell doesn't make those decisions," he replied coolly, taking the tablet from her. "Tell them I'll call tomorrow." The woman straightened, her gaze flickering to Elena with polite yet unmistakable curiosity. Julian followed her look, his expression unreadable. "This is Vanessa Morrison, my executive assistant," he said without ceremony. "Vanessa, my wife, Elena?" Vanessa's perfect smile barely masked the sharp glint in her eyes. Congratulations, Mrs. Harrington. What a surprise this marriage has been for everyone. Before Alina could respond, Vanessa leaned closer under the guise of adjusting a file on Julian's desk and murmured just loud enough for her to hear. Don't get too comfortable with the title. You're just another line item in a contract. Then she straightened, flashed another empty smile, and disappeared toward the front of the cabin, leaving Elena momentarily stunned by the blatant hostility. She's been with me for 5 years, Julian said flatly, not bothering to look up from his work. She's protective of the company. And of you, Elena noted. That earned her the briefest glance. The company is me. The jet began its descent. An hour later, through the window, Elena saw towering mountains surrounding a vast sapphire-blue lake. Under different circumstances, she might have found it breathtaking. A car waited on the tarmac. The drive to Julian's estate wound through dense pine forests before stopping at an imposing gate that opened automatically. Beyond it, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and stone perched on a cliff, overlooking the water. "This is where you live?" Elena asked, unable to hide her reaction. "One of several properties," Julian replied dismissively. "You'll have the east wing. My office and private quarters are in the west. We'll share common spaces when necessary, for appearances." The driver opened her door. As she stepped out, the crisp mountain air filled her lungs, grounding her in a way nothing else had all day. Inside, the house was a showcase of minimalist luxury, sleek lines, neutral tones, and expansive views of the lake. An older woman, Mrs. Reynolds, greeted her warmly and led her to her suite, a space larger than her entire childhood home, decorated in soft blues and cool grays. "Dinner is at 7, Mrs. Reynolds informed her. "Mr. Harrington expects punctuality." Once left alone, Elena walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was breathtaking, the lake's glassy surface reflecting the fading winter light. Yesterday, she had been a music teacher with a simple life. Today, she was the wife of one of America's most powerful tech moguls. A wife in name only, she reminded herself. This is just a business arrangement. As the sun dipped lower, her eyes caught movement outside. A solitary figure stood at the water's edge, where a dock stretched out over the lake. Julian. Even from a distance, his tall frame was unmistakable, motionless against the vast expanse of water. Something about the way he stood, the stillness, the weight of it, made her wonder. Was he as unaffected by all of this as he appeared? From where she stood, Elena could see Julian's silhouette against the darkening water, his posture straight-backed, yet somehow vulnerable. It made her wonder what ghosts haunted the man who now held control over her life. As the last traces of daylight faded, the dock lights flickered on, casting sharp lines of shadow and light across the lake. Julian remained still for a long moment before reaching into his pocket. Elena's breath caught. The locket. She had glimpsed it earlier, hanging discreetly from his watch chain. Now he held it in his palm, his fingers brushing over its surface as if the small object carried a weight far greater than its size. Then, just as quickly, he closed his fist around it and turned back toward the house. A realization settled deep in Elena's chest. This arrangement, this marriage, was not just about a debt. Whatever had connected Julian Harrington to her father ran deeper than money. And now she was caught in the middle of a story she didn't yet understand. As she prepared for dinner, she made a silent promise to herself. She would find out the truth, no matter what it cost. Dinner was a silent, impersonal affair. Elena sat across from Julian at a dining table large enough to seat 20, yet only set for 2. The 5-course meal, prepared by his private chef, tasted like nothing at all. Julian barely acknowledged her presence, his attention fixed on his phone. Occasionally, he would answer a call, his voice clipped and efficient as he discussed stock values and market trends. The silence stretched between them, grating against her nerves. "Is this how every meal will be?" she finally asked, setting down her fork with a deliberate clink against the fine china. Julian glanced up as if surprised she was still there. "I rarely eat at home," he said simply. "You're free to dine whenever and however you choose." "How considerate," she murmured, unable to keep the bite from her voice. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. "Did you expect candlelight and conversation, Mrs. Harrington?" "I expected basic courtesy." She held his gaze. "And it's still Whitmore. I'm keeping my name." As you wish, he replied without a hint of concern, though publicly you'll be addressed as Mrs. Harrington. With that, he returned to his phone. The moment dinner concluded, Julian stood. I have calls to make. Mrs. Reynolds will show you to your room. As if summoned by his words, the housekeeper appeared. Elena followed her through the vast corridors, mentally mapping out the layout of the house, her gilded cage. Your belongings have been unpacked, Mrs. Harrington, Mrs. Reynolds informed her, pushing open the double doors to reveal the same cool-toned suite from earlier. Elena barely nodded in acknowledgement, because her attention had fallen elsewhere. Laid out neatly on the king-size bed was a pale ivory silk nightgown, the tag still attached. A slow chill crept over her skin. The contract, the obligations, the reality of what this night traditionally implied struck her like a physical force. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds, she managed, though her throat had gone dry. Once the housekeeper left, she stood frozen, staring at the delicate fabric. She hadn't let herself think about this part of the arrangement. The contract had stipulated a complete marital relationship, but Julian had been so cold, so detached. She had convinced herself that it might only be for appearances. But now, heart pounding, she stepped into the bathroom, hoping the hot water might wash away her unease. It didn't. With trembling fingers, she pulled the silk nightgown over her head. The fabric was impossibly soft, whispering against her skin as it fell just above her knees. She glanced at the clock on the nightstand, 11:30 p.m. Then, footsteps. A soft knock. The door opened. Julian stood in the doorway. His tie was gone, the top buttons of his shirt undone. In the dim light, the sharp edges of his face seemed less severe, the shadows softening him in a way she hadn't expected. May I come in? His voice was lower than she'd heard it before. Elena nodded, unable to find her voice. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. You're afraid, he observed, keeping his distance. She lifted her chin, refusing to shrink beneath his gaze. Wouldn't you be? She challenged. I don't know you. I don't know what you expect. Julian's expression remained unreadable. What I expect? Julian repeated her words thoughtfully, stepping further into the room, but maintaining a careful distance between them. I expect what's in our contract, he said evenly, which includes this. Elena swallowed, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. This, she echoed, gesturing vaguely to the bed, to herself. Julian studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved closer. Each step was deliberate, measured. Elena's body tensed, every instinct screaming at her to step back. But she stood her ground. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could catch the scent of his cologne, subtle, woodsy, and unfamiliar. She braced herself, closed her eyes, waited. But nothing happened. Seconds passed, stretching unbearably. Finally, when she opened her eyes, she found Julian watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Slowly, telegraphing every movement, he lifted his hand. Elena held her breath as his fingers neared her face, then barely brushed her cheek. A touch so light it might have been imagined, if not for the warmth that lingered against her skin. For an instant, their eyes locked. Something shifted in his gaze. Surprise, uncertainty, vulnerability. The air between them charged, humming with something neither of them had expected. Then, just as abruptly as it had happened, Julian pulled away as if burned. He took a step back, his face hardening. This was a mistake. Elena's pulse pounded. What was? This arrangement, he muttered, running a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect order. The physical aspect, it's unnecessary. The sudden reversal left her disoriented. But the contract stands, Julian said, his voice firm. But this, he gestured vaguely between them, will be for appearances only. You'll have your privacy. Relief should have been her first reaction. Instead, an inexplicable disappointment coiled in her chest. Why the sudden change of heart? She asked. His jaw tightened. It's not a change of heart. It's a practical decision. There are already enough complications. He moved toward the door. You'll have this suite to yourself. We'll maintain appearances when necessary. That should satisfy the terms. She hesitated. Then, before she could stop herself, she said his name for the first time. Julian. He paused, his hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn. Why did you really want this marriage? She asked quietly. It wasn't just about my father's debt, was it? A silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, without looking back, he said, Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow will be an adjustment for both of us." Then he was gone. Alina sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed door. The ghost of his touch lingered on her cheek, raising more questions than answers. What had he seen in that moment of connection? What had made him pull away so suddenly? Sleep never came. Restless, Alina slipped out of her room, padding barefoot down the dimly lit corridors. The house was silent, its towering walls lined with artwork worth more than she had ever earned in a year. At the end of a long hallway, a soft light glowed from beneath a door. Voices. She moved closer, heart pounding as she caught snippets of the conversation. "We had an agreement," a woman hissed. "Vanessa?" "Plans change," Julian responded, his voice clipped. "Because of her?" Vanessa demanded. "You've worked years for this, Julian. Don't throw it away over some misplaced guilt." A sharp silence. Then, Julian's voice lower, darker. "That's enough, Vanessa." A pause. "Your sister wouldn't want." "I said enough." The quiet, cold fury in his tone made Alina flinch. Footsteps. She barely had time to duck into the shadows before the door swung open. Vanessa stormed past, her usual composure cracked by barely concealed frustration. She hesitated for the briefest moment, almost as if she sensed someone watching, before continuing down the hall. When she was gone, Alina turned toward the now vacant room. The door had been left slightly ajar. She hesitated, then stepped forward, peering inside. An office. One wall entirely made of glass, overlooking the moonlit lake. She was about to turn away. Then something caught her eye. A small wooden box. It sat open on Julian's desk. Against her better judgment, she took a step closer. Alina hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The wooden box on Julian's desk contained what appeared to be old mementos, a child's charm bracelet, a faded photograph, and the locket she had seen before. Her heart pounded as she picked up the locket, fingers trembling as she clicked it open. Inside was a small photograph of a young woman. She had Julian's eyes, the same striking features but with a softer expression, kind, gentle. Along the edge of the photo, delicate handwriting read, "Karen. Always remember." Alina barely had time to process the name before the sound of approaching footsteps sent panic racing through her veins. She hastily placed the locket back into the box and stepped away, scanning the room for a place to hide. Too late. Vanessa stood in the doorway. Surprise flickered across her face before it quickly hardened into something sharper. "Looking for something to use against your husband already, Mrs. Harrington?" she asked, her tone laced with contempt. Alina ignored the accusation, her mind still spinning. She nodded toward the locket. "Who is she?" For a brief moment, something passed through Vanessa's eyes. Pain, maybe. Then it was gone, buried beneath ice. "Someone your father helped destroy." She stepped forward, her perfume cloying in the confined space. "Whatever game you think you're playing, whatever you believe you'll gain from this arrangement, understand one thing. Julian Harrington isn't a man to be manipulated. He's lost too much already." "I'm not trying to manipulate anyone," Alina shot back, frustration edging her voice. "I just want to understand what's going on." Vanessa exhaled sharply, snatching the locket from the box and snapping it shut. "What's happening?" she said coolly, "is that you've stepped into a story that began long before you arrived. A story your father helped write when he betrayed this family." Alina's breath hitched. Betrayed? Before she could ask more, Vanessa's expression turned dismissive. "Go back to your room, Mrs. Harrington. This isn't a part of the house you want to be found in." Alina left, but her mind churned with questions. The woman in the locket. Julian's reaction to their brief touch. Vanessa's cryptic warnings. Her father's connection to it all. She had thought she understood the terms of this arrangement. She had been wrong. The web she was tangled in stretched far deeper than she had imagined. 3 weeks passed in an unspoken rhythm of avoidance and surveillance. Julian's presence in the house was nearly a ghostly one. His schedule seemed carefully crafted to ensure they rarely crossed paths. Alina took breakfast early. He appeared for coffee only after she had gone. She spent her afternoons in the library. He worked late into the night in his office. Yet she could never quite shake the feeling of being watched. Vanessa's appearances were unpredictable, always under the pretense of making sure Alina had everything she needed. But her smiles never reached her eyes. Mrs. Reynolds whispered to other staff about Alina's activities, conversations halting the moment she entered the room. Isolation pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. Until she found the music room. Hidden in the east wing, behind heavy double doors, the space felt like a secret world. A grand Steinway piano sat before towering windows overlooking the lake. A fine layer of dust covered the furniture, but the instrument itself was untouched, waiting. It had not been played in a long time. On the fourth morning, unable to resist, Elena let her fingers glide over the keys. At first she played tentatively. Simple scales, quiet melodies, afraid of breaking the mansion's oppressive silence. By the second week, starved for an outlet, she lost herself in Chopin nocturnes and Debussy preludes, music spilling from memory, filling the hollow spaces inside her. The house, so empty and vast, finally had something breathing life into it. Then, "You play beautifully." Elena's hands froze mid-phrase. Julian stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. She hadn't heard him approach. "I didn't mean to stop you," he said, remaining at the threshold, as if unwilling to step inside. Elena exhaled, slowly closing the piano lid. "I didn't know anyone was listening." "Quite the opposite," he murmured. For the first time in weeks, she met his gaze. And for the first time since their wedding night, she saw something in his expression that wasn't cold detachment. Something else entirely. A pause, then Julian spoke. "My mother played." Elena blinked at the unexpected admission. This was her piano. The personal detail caught her off guard. "Was she a professional?" she asked cautiously. She could have been. There was something in his voice, something she hadn't heard before. Warmth, maybe. Nostalgia. "She taught at Juilliard before she married my father." Elena hesitated without thinking. "Like me." Julian's gaze sharpened. "I mean," she corrected quickly, "I taught music, not at Juilliard, obviously." Something subtle shifted in his expression, the momentary openness vanishing behind the familiar mask. "Yes," he said simply. "I know." Of course, he knew. He probably knew everything about her life before their arrangement, while she remained in the dark about him. About why she was really here. Julian turned to leave, but then hesitated. "Feel free to use this room whenever you like," he said. "The piano shouldn't sit silent." That evening, she found a leather-bound book resting on her bed, a collection of rare Chopin manuscripts. No note, no explanation, just an offering. She understood immediately. The next morning, for the first time since her arrival, Elena stepped outside. January in Lake Haven meant blankets of snow and a sharp, biting cold. But after weeks of confinement, the fresh air was invigorating. Bundled in a coat she had found in her closet, an expensive down parka that fit her perfectly, she wandered through the terraced gardens, now frozen under winter's grasp. Near the greenhouse, she spotted an elderly man carefully clearing snow from a stone pathway. He straightened when he saw her, removing his worn cap. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrington," he called, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. The first she had seen since arriving. She returned the smile, stepping closer. "Good morning." "Harold Winters," he introduced himself, head groundskeeper. He gestured toward the sprawling property. "Been tending these grounds for 35 years since James Harrington first built this place." "Julian's father?" Harold nodded. "Fine man, Mr. James. And Mrs. Elizabeth, she's the one who designed these gardens. Used to play that piano you've been bringing back to life." A flicker of connection stirred in Elena's chest. Another woman who had once sat at those keys. "You've been here a long time," she said. "You must know the family well." Harold's smile faltered. "Well enough, ma'am?" "Please," she said, "call me Elena." She hesitated, then asked, "Did you know someone named Karen?" The change was immediate. Harold's warm demeanor chilled. His gaze flickered, just briefly, toward the house. "Miss Karen was Mr. Julian's sister," he said at last. "Beautiful child, loved music like her mother." Elena held her breath. Harold adjusted his cap. "She passed about 7 years ago now." Then, as if realizing he had already said too much, he picked up his snow shovel. "Excuse me, Miss Elena," he muttered. "The east pathways need clearing before the temperature drops." He hurried away, leaving her with more questions than answers. That afternoon, determined to find out more, Elena searched the mansion's library for any mention of Karen Harrington. She combed through shelves lined with leather-bound classics and thick business texts, but found nothing. No family photos, no memoirs, no clues. It was as if she had never existed. As January melted into February, Alina settled into a quiet, solitary routine. Mornings in the music room, afternoons spent wandering the grounds or tucked away in the library, dinners alone in her suite or occasionally in the kitchen, where Mrs. Reynolds, at first distant, began to warm to her presence. Julian, however, remained an enigma. He was present in the house, but always just out of reach. Twice, she caught him outside the music room, lingering just beyond the doorway. Each time, he disappeared the moment she finished playing. Once, she glimpsed him standing at the dock again, his tall figure outlined against the cold gray water, always alone. On a snowy Tuesday, Elena's exploration led her to a small study she hadn't noticed before. Unlike the formal, impersonal rooms that dominated the mansion, this space felt lived in. A worn leather chair faced a chessboard, its pieces frozen mid-game. Bookshelves held paperbacks with cracked spines. A forgotten coffee mug sat on a side table, and there, tucked between the books on a high shelf, a photo frame lay face down. Elena hesitated, then reached for it. The picture showed a teenage Julian, maybe 16, his arm draped protectively around a girl of about 12. Same striking gray-green eyes, same dark hair. Behind them stood a handsome couple, his parents, presumably. And there, in the background, a familiar face. Harold, years younger but unmistakable, tending to the rose garden. That was the last summer we were all here together. Elena spun around. Julian stood in the doorway, unreadable as always, but something in his stance, the way he held himself, felt unguarded. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, placing the frame back. "I was just exploring." This was Karen's study. He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the untouched room. She loved books, adventure stories especially. The mention of his sister surprised her. "Harold told me she was your sister, that she passed away." Julian's jaw tightened. 7 years ago she was 19. "I'm sorry." And she meant it. Whatever else Julian was, whatever his reasons for bringing her here, his grief was undeniable. It was a long time ago. The words contradicted the pain in his voice. Elena took a breath, deciding to take a chance. "Is that why you wanted this arrangement? Because of what happened to her?" His gaze snapped to hers, suddenly cold. "You've been asking questions. Wouldn't you? In my position?" She held firm. "I was brought here for a reason, Julian, and I don't believe it was just about my father's debt." For a moment she thought he might answer honestly. Then his expression hardened. "Your father took something irreplaceable from me." His voice was measured, controlled. "This arrangement ensures I get something in return." Elena's frustration broke through. "And what exactly are you getting?" "I'm here, isolated, playing a role I don't understand in a story I don't know." Julian's response was cool, final. "You're fulfilling a contract, nothing more." But his eyes told another story. She had once seen nothing but detachment in those gray-green depths. Now she recognized something else. Conflict. Whatever game Julian Harrington was playing, he wasn't as certain of the rules as he pretended to be. Before she could press further, his phone rang. His expression shifted instantly, professional, distant. "I have to take this." He moved toward the door but hesitated. "Vanessa has arranged a wardrobe fitting for you tomorrow. There's a charity gala next week in San Francisco. We'll be attending together." "Playing the happy couple?" Elena asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Something like a smile ghosted across his lips, gone so quickly she wasn't sure if she had imagined it. "Playing our parts, Mrs. Harrington. That's what we agreed to." He left, but Elena remained in Karen's study, feeling the echoes of the girl who had once filled this house with life. Whatever connection her father had to Karen's death, it had led Elena here for a reason. She studied the photograph again, her resolve hardening. No matter what it cost, she would find the truth. "Stand still, Mrs. Harrington." The tailor muttered around a mouthful of pins as he adjusted the hem of the sapphire gown draped over Elena's frame. Vanessa circled like a hawk, her sharp gaze missing nothing. "The neckline should be lower. This isn't a convent fundraiser." "The neckline is fine," Elena countered, locking eyes with Vanessa in the mirror. 6 months. 6 months of careful distance, of unspoken rules. And now, for the first time, they would step into the world as husband and wife. Even if it was just for show. Their first public appearance together. A charity gala, benefiting the Harrington Foundation's medical research program. Vanessa's expression was cool, but her words carried an edge as she fastened a diamond bracelet around Elena's wrist. Julian expects his wife to make an impression. Elena met her gaze in the mirror. I'm sure he does. You'll be meeting board members, investors, family friends, people who knew the Harringtons long before you appeared. The unspoken message was clear. You don't belong here. Elena lifted her chin. I'll make my own impression, thank you. 6 months in this gilded cage had taught her one thing: never back down. The door opened. Julian entered, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, but stopped abruptly at the sight of Elena standing on the fitting platform. His gaze swept over her, unreadable as always. Vanessa arched an eyebrow. Well, she prompted when he said nothing. Should we adjust the neckline? Julian's gaze flicked to Vanessa, then back to Elena. The dress is perfect as it is. The unexpected compliment, delivered in front of a visibly irritated Vanessa, caught Elena off guard. You have excellent taste, Elena. Her surprise must have shown because his lips almost curved into something like amusement. Thank you. But the moment passed as quickly as it had come. The jet leaves at 4, Julian said, checking his watch. The Fairmont has prepared the presidential suite. We'll return Sunday morning. 2 nights in San Francisco. Vanessa interjected. Don't forget the investor breakfast on Saturday. And Maxwell wants a private meeting beforehand. Julian's jaw tensed. I'll speak with Maxwell at the event, not before. He's still the vice president of the company, Vanessa reminded him, and your father's brother. I'm well aware of who Maxwell is. Julian's tone carried a quiet warning. He turned back to Elena. We leave in an hour. After he left, Vanessa supervised the final touches on the fitting with renewed determination, her earlier defeat shifting into something sharper, barely concealed hostility. As Elena stepped out of the gown, Vanessa spoke, her voice low. One piece of advice. Elena turned, arching a brow. Don't try to play games you don't understand. Vanessa's gaze was unwavering. Julian Harrington isn't just some music teacher from Oregon. He built an empire by being ruthless with his enemies. Is that what I am? Elena asked, genuinely curious. His enemy? Vanessa's lips curled, as if she hadn't decided. I do know one thing, she studied Elena carefully. You're a means to an end. Don't forget that. The flight to San Francisco passed in silence. Julian worked. Elena watched the mountains fade into the distant glow of city lights. It wasn't until they were seated in the limousine from the airport that he finally spoke. The Harrington Foundation's annual gala attracts significant attention, he said, his tone purely business. The press will be present. Questions about our marriage are inevitable. Elena hesitated. And what exactly should I say? The truth, to a point. He handed her a slim folder. We met through family connections, a whirlwind romance. Keep it simple. She flipped through the pages. Names, photos. You expect me to study for this? I expect you to play your role convincingly. His eyes met hers briefly. People will be watching closely. Not everyone supports my leadership. Elena didn't miss the underlying meaning. Your uncle. A flicker of surprise crossed Julian's face before he masked it. Among others. Maxwell believes the company should prioritize profit over innovation. We've disagreed on direction since my father's death. It was the most personal information he had volunteered in months. Before Elena could respond, the car pulled up to the Fairmont Hotel's entrance. Photographers lined the velvet ropes. Julian exited first, then turned, extending his hand toward her. Elena hesitated only a second before placing her fingers in his. The moment she stepped out, camera flashes exploded around them. Julian leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. Smile, Mrs. Harrington. His arms slid around her waist, firm, possessive. The show begins now. And just like that, they became the illusion the world expected them to be. Elena moved through the gauntlet of photographers, her expression poised, her smile carefully curated. But she was acutely aware of Julian's touch. The first deliberate contact since that night in her bedroom months ago. The presidential suite occupied the entire top floor of the hotel, offering panoramic views of the glittering bay. The moment they entered, Julian retreated to the office area, his focus already on his laptop. There are 2 bedrooms, he informed her without looking up. You'll have privacy. That evening, as Elena fastened diamond earrings, another anonymous gift delivered to her suite, she studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror was a stranger, sophisticated, elegant, draped in sapphire silk and family jewels. A convincing Mrs. Harrington. In the living room, Julian waited, his black tuxedo tailored to perfection, emphasizing his broad shoulders and lean strength. When she entered, he stilled. His gaze tracked her movements with an intensity that sent warmth curling through her. "You look," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The Harrington diamonds suit you." Elena touched the teardrop earrings. "These are family heirlooms?" "They belong to my mother." His voice was unreadable as he extended his arm. "Shall we?" The ballroom at the St. Regis glittered with San Francisco's elite. Conversations lulled briefly as they entered, curious eyes following the notoriously private CEO and his enigmatic wife. Julian moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his hand at the small of her back guiding her through introductions. Then, Elliot finally decided to join the land of the living. The booming voice belonged to a distinguished man with silver hair and familiar gray-green eyes. Maxwell Harrington. Elena recognized him instantly from the dossier. "Uncle," Julian acknowledged. "You remember my wife, Elena?" Maxwell smiled, but it never touched his eyes. "Ah, yes, the music teacher. Quite the career change, my dear." He turned back to Julian, amusement flickering in his gaze. "Your father would have appreciated the irony. He always said music was an expensive hobby, not a profession." Julian's posture stiffened. Barely perceptible, but Elena noticed. "Elena's talent speaks for itself." "Does it?" Maxwell's brow lifted. "Perhaps we'll be treated to a demonstration tonight." As if on cue, the event coordinator approached. "Mrs. Harrington, would you be willing to play something for our guests?" Elena barely had time to react before Julian's voice cut through the conversation. "My wife isn't here to perform." His tone was firm. Elena glanced at him, then at Maxwell, who watched the exchange with mild amusement. "An opportunity." "Actually," she said smoothly, "I'd be happy to play. With your permission, of course, husband." Something passed between them. A silent challenge, a test. Julian's expression remained neutral, but after a long moment, he gave a single nod. At the grand piano on the small stage, Elena let her fingers hover over the keys, grounding herself. Then she began to play. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The melody flowed effortlessly, filling the vast ballroom, threading through the air like something tangible. All the emotions of the past months, the isolation, the unanswered questions, the unspoken tensions, bled into each note. By the time she finished, the room erupted into applause. As she returned to Julian's side, she caught approving glances from the board members. But it was Maxwell's expression that stood out, a calculating glint in his eyes. "Charming," he remarked, swirling the whiskey in his glass, "though I wonder how long until the novelty wears off." Julian didn't respond. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Without a word, he turned to Elena, extending his hand in silent invitation. She hesitated, then accepted, allowing him to lead her to the dance floor. His hand settled at her waist, firm but not unkind. His other hand clasped hers. As they moved in perfect unison, Elena felt the tension between them shift into something else. "You're full of surprises, Mrs. Harrington," Julian murmured, his voice just for her. "As are you, Mr. Harrington." A faint smirk touched his lips. "I didn't know CEOs were required to learn ballroom dancing. Standard curriculum at Harvard Business." Elena almost laughed. For the first time since their wedding day, she wasn't sure where the performance ended and something real began. School, along with hostile takeovers and stock manipulation. Elena blinked. Did Julian Harrington just make a joke? The unexpected humor caught her off guard. "Was that an attempt at sarcasm?" she asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Occasionally." His eyes warmed slightly, though I've had little reason to recently. They turned in perfect synchrony, the dance moving them effortlessly across the floor. Out of the corner of her eye, Elena noticed Vanessa standing at the ballroom's edge, her expression stormy. Nearby, Maxwell spoke intently with a group of board members, glancing their way every so often. A sharp contrast, Julian's rare moment of ease against the undercurrent of tension surrounding them. Elena seized the opportunity. "Why did you really bring me here?" she asked, emboldened by the momentary intimacy of the dance. "We've barely spoken for months, and suddenly I'm being paraded in front of the board." Julian's jaw tensed, but his steps never faltered. "Perception is reality in business, Elena. A stable personal life projects confidence to investors. So that's all this is? A business strategy?" His gaze met hers, unwavering. "Why did you accept my proposal?" His voice was softer, but there was a challenge beneath it. It wasn't just for your family's financial security, was it? The question landed with precision. Because it wasn't just that. Not entirely. Elena had barely admitted it to herself, her curiosity, her determination to understand what connected her father to this man. She exhaled slowly. You know why. Her voice was almost a whisper. The same reason you offered it. We both want something beyond what's written in that contract. For a heartbeat, his carefully constructed mask slipped. Vulnerability, doubt, even desire. Then, a camera flash shattered the moment. A society photographer capturing the powerful CEO and his enigmatic wife. Julian's entire posture changed. He took a step back, the cold neutrality returning to his features. You should circulate, he said, his voice distant once more. Meet the board members without me hovering. It will seem more natural. And just like that, the moment was gone. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and polite conversation. Elena found herself seated between a renowned neurosurgeon who praised the Foundation's medical research and a venture capitalist who asked pointed questions about her whirlwind romance. Across the table, Maxwell raised his glass. To new partnerships, he announced smoothly, his gaze flicking meaningfully between Elena and Julian. And then, his expression darkened just slightly, and to finishing what was started long ago. A murmur of confusion rippled through the table. Julian merely nodded, his grip on his wine glass tightening, but his eyes never left his uncle's face. Later, as guests began departing, Elena overheard voices behind a partially closed door. She froze, recognizing Vanessa's clipped tone. The board is wavering, she said urgently. Maxwell's been planting doubts for months. We need those documents before the quarterly meeting. A male voice responded. Calm, assured, and we'll have them. Maxwell. Elena's pulse quickened. Tonight's little display changes nothing. She has no idea what she's stepped into. Elena moved closer, barely breathing. Everything is proceeding according to plan, Maxwell continued. Our contact at the Chronicle will run the story tomorrow. By the time Julian realizes what's happening, it will be too late. Elena's blood turned to ice. A setup, a betrayal, and she had become a pawn in the game. 16 hours later, rain lashed against the windows of San Francisco General Hospital as Elena paced the waiting room. Julian's car had skidded off the rain-slicked coastal highway late last night. Now the doctor's words echoed in her mind. Subdural hematoma. Pressure on the brain. The next 24 hours are critical. Elena gripped the chair beside her, knuckles white. She hadn't told anyone what she had overheard between Maxwell and Vanessa. There hadn't been time. By the time she returned to the ballroom, Julian had been locked in a tense conversation with his uncle. They had barely made it back to the hotel to gather their things before Julian received a call about leaked documents. And now, he was fighting for his life, and she was no closer to understanding the truth. Julian had insisted on driving back to Lake Haven despite the storm. He never made it. Now, Dr. Harrison stood before her, blood staining his scrubs. Your husband is stable, he said. The internal bleeding is under control. We've set the broken bones, but the head trauma is our primary concern. Elena's throat tightened. If he regains consciousness, she corrected quietly. The doctor's expression softened. There's every reason to hope for a full recovery. In the ICU, Julian lay unnaturally still, his commanding presence reduced to a fragile figure surrounded by tubes and bandages. Elena reached for his hand, cradling it between hers. You need to wake up, she whispered. There are too many unanswered questions. The door swung open. Vanessa. Her eyes were red, her perfectly pressed suit now wrinkled, the first crack in her usual control. This is your fault, she said, her voice raw. If you hadn't distracted him. Elena's head snapped up. My fault? She cut in sharply. I heard you and Maxwell at the gala, planning to undermine him, talking about leaked documents. Vanessa's expression flickered, shock quickly buried beneath ice. You have no idea what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. A nurse entered, checking Julian's vitals, cutting off Vanessa's response. By the time they were alone again, Vanessa had smoothed her features back into careful indifference. I've arranged for Julian's personal physician to take over his care, she said. You should go back to the hotel. I'm not leaving. Vanessa exhaled sharply. Your contract doesn't cover playing the devoted wife in a hospital room. Then consider this an amendment. Vanessa didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out. Hours passed. Elena remained by Julian's side, exhaustion pulling at her, until a gentle voice roused her from half-sleep. "Mrs. Harrington?" She blinked up at a man in a white coat, his expression kind but assessing. "I'm Dr. Marcus Chun, neurosurgeon. Julian and I were roommates at Harvard." Dr. Chun examined Julian carefully before hesitating. "I was surprised to hear he married," he said lightly. Then more quietly, "After Karen." Elena's pulse quickened. "After Karen?" she prompted. Dr. Chun hesitated, then sighed. She had a congenital heart condition. She needed an experimental treatment, but insurance wouldn't cover it. A pause. "Then there was a financial scandal. Funds embezzled, stocks manipulated. By the time it was uncovered, the company had lost millions." Elena's breath caught. "And my father was responsible," she whispered. Dr. Chun's gaze turned sympathetic. "Jonathan Whitmore was the company's accountant. The investigation found he falsified records, moved funds." Julian was devastated, not just by Karen's death, but by the betrayal. A hollow weight settled in Elena's chest. This marriage, this arrangement, had never been about money. It was about rage, about grief. "For what it's worth," Dr. Chun added as he adjusted Julian's IV, "I've never seen him look at anyone the way he watched you at the gala." Elena frowned. "What do you mean?" "When I called during your piano performance, he refused to leave. Said he didn't want to miss a note." Elena's gaze dropped to Julian's hand in hers. He hadn't just been playing a role that night. "I understand now," she murmured. "But there's more to this story, isn't there?" She leaned closer, brushing her thumb gently over Julian's knuckles. "I need you to wake up and tell me your side." A sharp beeping sound startled her. The monitor tracking Julian's brain activity spiked. His fingers twitched against hers. Then, his eyelids fluttered. "Doctor," Elena called urgently. "He's waking up." After the breathing tube was removed, Julian's gaze found hers. "What?" His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "You're in the hospital," she said gently. "There was an accident. You've been unconscious for almost 24 hours. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Then, alarm. "The documents." Dr. Chun stepped forward. "Don't worry about that now." But Julian's focus remained locked on Elena. "My jacket," he rasped. "Inside pocket." Confused, Elena reached for the neatly folded jacket resting on the chair. She searched the pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. She lifted it. "This?" Julian nodded weakly. "Keep it safe." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't trust." A harsh coughing fit overtook him, cutting off the rest. Elena tightened her grip on the drive, heart pounding. Later back at the hotel, Elena plugged the USB into her laptop. Hundreds of financial documents filled the screen. Her father's name appeared over and over again, a paper trail of falsified records, embezzlement, manipulated stocks. But as she scrolled further, a timeline inconsistency emerged. Transactions dated after her father had already... Elena's breath caught. The pieces were falling into place, and nothing was as it seemed. The timestamps didn't match, neither did the metadata. Elena's musician's mind, trained to recognize patterns others overlooked, saw it instantly. These documents had been tampered with. Someone had deliberately framed her father. Someone with the authority and access to manipulate company records. As dawn broke over San Francisco, Elena made a decision. She copied the drive's contents to her laptop, then secured the original. Whatever game Maxwell was playing, whatever truth lay buried in these files, she would uncover it. For her father's memory, for Karen's justice, and for the complicated, wounded man who had pulled her into his life for reasons that no longer seemed as simple as revenge. Julian's eyes fluttered open to the soft light of morning. His body ached, his head pounded. And then, he saw Elena. She was asleep in the chair beside his hospital bed, her head resting on her folded arms. Scattered across her lap, financial documents covered in neat annotations. His gaze drifted over them. Timeline inconsistencies, signature discrepancies. His pulse spiked. Elena stirred, feeling his movement. When she looked up, her eyes widened. "You're awake." Julian's voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Feels like I was hit by a truck." Then, more pointedly, "What are you doing?" Elena hurriedly gathered the papers, hesitating only for a moment before answering. Trying to understand what really happened 7 years ago. Julian's expression darkened. "That case was closed a long time ago." "Then why do the records not add up?" she countered. "Your father's company blamed my father. But these documents, these dates..." She exhaled sharply. "They tell a different story." After Dr. Chun checked his vitals and left, Julian turned to her again. Why are you investigating this? His voice was quieter now. What does it matter to you? Elena met his gaze. Because I ended up in this marriage because of a lie. Julian stilled. My father wasn't solely responsible for what happened, she said. I know it, and now I can prove it. His jaw tightened. What makes you so sure? Elena lifted the marked-up documents, pointing to discrepancies. I teach music. I work with patterns every day. When something's out of place, I notice. She traced her fingers along the evidence. These signatures don't match my father's handwriting. These transactions happened after he supposedly confessed. And this approval? She tapped the page. It's dated 2 days after his access was revoked. Julian's brows drew together, his mind processing the implications. You noticed all this? I had time while you were unconscious. Her voice was steady. And motivation. His expression flickered. Motivation? Dr. Chun told me about Karen, she said softly. Julian tensed, about her condition, about how my father's supposed embezzlement meant she couldn't get the treatment she needed. A long silence stretched between them. Then carefully she asked, Is that why you arranged this marriage? As punishment? For a moment Julian didn't respond. Then, when I first proposed the arrangement, yes. His voice was low, almost reluctant. It was about justice. Your father took something precious from me. Elena's breath caught. And now? She asked. Julian exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Now? I don't know what this is anymore. The words hung between them. Before either of them could say more, the door swung open. Vanessa. She froze, surprised to see Julian awake. Then her sharp gaze landed on the documents in Elena's hands. Her expression darkened. What are those doing here? Julian didn't hesitate. Elena found discrepancies in the investigation. Vanessa's posture stiffened. That case was closed years ago. The evidence was conclusive. Elena's voice was calm but firm. Was it, or was it manipulated? Vanessa's eyes flashed. You're out of your depth. Julian ignored her. His focus remained on Elena. What else have you found? Elena pushed the documents toward him. I've been cross-referencing records. My father supposedly confessed on March 12th, but these transfers, authorized under his credentials, continued until March 20th. Julian's jaw tightened. Vanessa shook her head. That's impossible. His access was revoked immediately. Elena met Julian's gaze. Exactly. So either these transfers are fake, or someone else used his credentials after he was removed, Julian finished. His voice was dangerously quiet. Someone with administrative access. A beat of silence. Then, like Maxwell, Elena said. Vanessa paled. This is absurd, she snapped. Maxwell has dedicated his life to Grant Innovations. A company he believes should have been his, Julian interrupted coldly. My father chose me as his successor, not his brother. The weight of the words hung heavy in the air. Vanessa's fingers twitched at her side. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out. Elena's stomach twisted. She's going straight to Maxwell, isn't she? Julian exhaled, leaning his head back against the pillows. Almost certainly. Elena's grip tightened on the documents. The truth was finally coming to light. But the game was far from over. 7 years ago, your father walked into my office. Julian's voice was quiet, but there was a weight behind it. He admitted to manipulating company finances, including the funds meant for Karen's treatment. But when I asked why, he couldn't explain it. Elena's brows furrowed. That doesn't sound like my father. Her voice was steady, but the doubt clawed at her. He was meticulous, ethical. I trusted him. So did I, Julian admitted. That's why I hired him, despite his lack of experience with corporations our size. Maxwell recommended him highly. Elena stilled. Did you ever wonder why? Before Julian could respond, Dr. Chun stepped in, eyeing the monitors flashing red. His blood pressure is spiking. He needs rest. Elena sighed and stood. Julian caught her wrist before she could leave. My father's private study, at the Lake Haven estate. His voice was weaker now, but urgent. The key is in my desk at home. If he kept any evidence, it would be there. Outside, Dr. Chun's expression was serious. If what you're suggesting is true, Maxwell won't hesitate to protect himself. Elena swallowed hard. She already knew that. Back inside Julian's room, his voice was quieter. You're going to Tahoe? Yes. Mrs. Reynolds will help you access my father's study. Take Harold with you. He was my father's right-hand man. He knows where everything is. Elena hesitated at the doorway. Julian, if my father wasn't responsible, why did he confess? Julian's jaw clenched. That's the question I've never been able to answer. A long pause. He seemed defeated, said he had no choice. Alina's stomach twisted. What if he was being coerced? Threatened? Julian exhaled sharply. Be careful, Alina. Then, before she could leave, he caught her hand again. When this is over, whatever we discover, we need to talk. His fingers tightened briefly around hers. About us. About what this marriage really is now. Alina nodded once. Then she was gone. At Lake Haven, Harold led Alina into James Harrington's private study. They spent hours searching through stacks of old financial reports and letters, until Harold suddenly straightened. Miss Karen used to help her father organize his papers, he murmured. She had a system. She'd encode information in sheet music, markings that meant something special. Alina's pulse quickened. The music room. Inside, they found what they were looking for. Old musical scores, seemingly ordinary, except for Karen's notes scrawled in the margins. Alina traced her fingers over the ink. These aren't musical directions, numbers, dates, coordinates. Then, something at the bottom of a Debussy piece caught her eye. Small, almost imperceptible. Uncle M. P.O. Box, blackmail. Alina exhaled shakily. The abandoned boathouse. Harold's voice was grim. James Harrington's secret safe. Inside the boathouse, concealed behind a false panel, they found it. A thumb drive. A letter, written in Karen's delicate handwriting. The footage was damning. On the screen, Maxwell stood before Jonathan Whitmore, his expression cold. You'll confess to everything, Maxwell said smoothly, or your daughter's medical school acceptance disappears. Your son's scholarship, gone. Your wife's health insurance, canceled. Jonathan's face crumpled. Why are you doing this? He whispered. Maxwell's smile was thin. I discovered your embezzlement by accident. The company should have been mine. He stepped closer, voice quiet but ruthless. Julian is too soft, spending millions on medical research instead of maximizing profits. Jonathan's hands trembled. Karen's treatment. Maxwell cut him off. Her treatment was never going to work. I simply redirected funds to more profitable ventures and let her die. Jonathan's breath shuddered. Business requires hard decisions. Maxwell's tone was almost bored. Now sign, or your family suffers next. Alina's hands clenched into fists as she watched her father sacrifice himself to protect his family. Tears blurred her vision. Karen had uncovered the truth. She had been gathering evidence. She had planned to reveal everything. But she never got the chance, because Maxwell had ensured she didn't survive long enough for that surgery. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Reynolds called, voice urgent. Maxwell and Vanessa are at the mansion, searching Julian's office. Alina's stomach dropped. Take the car back to San Francisco, Harold said immediately. I'll delay them. As Alina sped away, she dialed Dr. Chun. Don't let anyone near Julian. Maxwell knows we're on to him. She clutched the evidence to her chest as rain pounded against the car windows. 7 years of lies were about to unravel, and Alina prayed she could reach Julian before Maxwell realized just how much they had discovered. Traffic crawled through San Francisco's rain-soaked streets. Every red light felt like an eternity. The USB drive burned in her hands. The truth was right here, and she wasn't letting it slip away. Alina's anxiety grew with every stalled moment. Twice, she tried calling Dr. Chun, but the hospital's reception swallowed her calls. When her phone finally rang, she grabbed it with shaking fingers. Harold. His voice was tight with urgency. Miss Alina, they know. Her pulse spiked. What? Mrs. Reynolds overheard Maxwell on the phone. They're sending someone to intercept you. Alina's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I'm almost at the hospital. Be careful. That man has spent years hiding this truth. He won't stop now. The call cut out, leaving only the sound of rain hammering against the windshield. Alina's heart pounded as she turned into the hospital's underground parking garage. Nearly empty. Silent. She kept to the shadows, moving quickly toward the service entrance Dr. Chun had told her to use. Rain pelted her face as she ran, the thumb drive and documents secured in her waterproof bag. Then, a figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Vanessa, perfectly composed despite the downpour, blocking her path. Give me the drive, Alina. Alina skidded to a halt, breath fogging in the cold air. How did you get here so fast? Vanessa's lips curled slightly. Private jet, perks of working for a billionaire. She extended her hand. Maxwell is willing to be generous. A divorce settlement that will set your family for life. All he wants is that drive and your silence. Alina's stomach twisted. And Julian? Vanessa's voice was cool. He'll be taken care of. A chill ran through Elena that had nothing to do with the rain. You're in love with him, aren't you? Vanessa's perfect mask didn't slip, but something flickered in her eyes. Elena took a step forward. That's why you've helped Maxwell all this time. He promised you Julian. Vanessa's jaw tightened. I've spent 7 years by his side, watching him destroy himself over his sister, who was already dying. Maxwell understands what Grant Innovations needs, what Julian needs. And what's that? Vanessa's gaze hardened. Direction, purpose, freedom from guilt. Elena's voice was steady. You mean control. Elliot would never forgive you for this betrayal. Vanessa's composure cracked, just slightly. He never even sees me, she hissed. Not until you came along. Then suddenly he's dancing at galas, listening to piano music, looking at people like they matter. Realization struck like a bolt of lightning. You hate me, Elena murmured, because he notices me. Vanessa's eyes flashed. I hate you because you've made him weak when we need him strong. She took another step forward. The drive now. Elena stood her ground. No. Vanessa reached into her jacket and pulled out a gun. I'm not asking. That won't be necessary. The voice echoed across the garage, smooth and commanding. Elena's stomach dropped. Maxwell. He emerged from the black sedan, adjusting his cufflinks, his face the picture of effortless control. Mrs. Harrington. His smile was polite. Let's be reasonable. Whatever you think you found, it can be explained. Business is complex. Decisions made during crises aren't always clear-cut. Elena's hands clenched at her sides, like embezzling funds meant for your dying niece's treatment. Her voice was shaking with fury. Like framing my father when he discovered your crimes. Maxwell's smile tightened. Your father was in over his head. I offered him a way out that protected your family. Elena's breath caught. By destroying his reputation? By making his last years miserable with guilt? Maxwell shrugged. Collateral damage. The company survived. Thousands of jobs were preserved. Her stomach twisted. And you nearly had control, she said quietly. Maxwell's eyes darkened. Julian refused to step aside. The mask of calm indifference slipped. He's just like his father. Brilliant but naive. Spending millions on medical research instead of maximizing profits. The board wants results, not humanitarian projects. The board, Elena said slowly, will want the truth. Maxwell exhaled, his patience wearing thin. The board, he said coldly, will never hear your theory. A pause. Now, the drive. Elena swallowed hard. It's too late, she bluffed. I already sent copies to the district attorney and the SEC. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. No, you haven't. Elena's heart pounded. You came straight here from Tahoe. No time for strategic planning. Maxwell nodded to Vanessa. Take the drive, then ensure she won't be speaking to anyone. Elena's stomach lurched as Vanessa raised the gun, but her hand trembled slightly. You're not a killer, Vanessa, Elena said quietly. The hesitation lasted only a second, but it was enough. You're not a killer, Vanessa. Elena's voice was quiet but steady. Whatever you've done, there's a line you haven't crossed. Maxwell's tone was cold, almost bored. She doesn't need to be. He took a step closer, his confidence unshaken. A tragic accident. His voice was eerily smooth. The grieving widow, distraught over her husband's condition, takes her own life in the hospital parking garage. A chill ran through Elena. Then, that won't be necessary, Uncle. The voice, weak but commanding, froze everyone in place. At the entrance to the garage, Julian stood, leaning heavily against Dr. Chun for support. His hospital gown peeked out from beneath a hastily thrown-on coat, but despite his physical weakness, his presence was unshakable. Maxwell recovered quickly. You should be in bed, he said smoothly. You've suffered a traumatic brain injury. Not traumatic enough to miss you threatening my wife at gunpoint. Julian's voice, though hoarse, carried unmistakable authority. A muscle twitched in Vanessa's jaw. Lower the gun. Vanessa hesitated. She has evidence, Julian, she pleaded. It's fabricated. She's trying to turn you against us. Julian's eyes never left her. Us, he repeated, voice quiet but cutting. Vanessa's throat bobbed. The company, your legacy, everything we've built. Julian took an unsteady step forward. Everything we've built, on my sister's death, he corrected. A crack formed in Maxwell's usually impenetrable facade. Julian's gaze hardened. I heard the recording, Vanessa. I know what he did to Karen, to Jonathan Whitmore. Maxwell's mask finally slipped. You were a child, he snapped, making emotional decisions. The company would have bankrupted itself on experimental treatments with a 15% success rate. Julian's hands curled into fists. That was my choice to make. My family's choice. Maxwell's composure cracked completely. Years of resentment boiled to the surface. Your father left me nothing, he spat. I worked alongside him for decades, and then the company goes to his inexperienced son? Julian's eyes darkened. So you punished Karen for it, he said quietly. You let her die, to teach us a lesson. Maxwell's breath came sharp and ragged, but he didn't deny it. Business requires sacrifice. Julian's voice trembled with fury. Not my sister's life. His knees buckled, and Dr. Chun steadied him. The board is waiting upstairs, Uncle. Julian's voice was rough but deadly calm. Along with the FBI. For the first time, doubt flickered in Maxwell's eyes. You're bluffing, he sneered. Julian gave a small nod toward the sedan parked nearby. A car door opened. Two men in dark suits stepped out, their badges catching the dim garage light. FBI. Raymond Chun, Julian said mildly, nodding toward Dr. Chun. Not just my doctor. He's also the brother of Assistant Director Andrew Chun, Financial Crimes Division. Maxwell's face drained of color. One of the agents stepped forward. Maxwell Harrington, he announced. You're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Vanessa's shoulders slumped as she finally lowered the gun. Maxwell barely blinked as they handcuffed him. But as they led him away, he hissed at Julian. You're making a mistake. The company needs leadership they respect, not a sentimental fool. Julian watched him with cold detachment. They'll have it. A pause. Just not yours. The moment Maxwell disappeared from view, Julian's strength gave out completely. Dr. Chun caught him, lowering him into a wheelchair. You shouldn't have left your bed, the doctor scolded. Julian's breath was shaky, but his eyes never left Elena's. I couldn't let her face them alone. He swallowed hard. Not after everything. Back in his hospital room, with Dr. Chun ensuring their privacy, Elena finally showed him everything. The security footage. The musical codes Karen left behind. The letter she had written him. Julian's hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. She knew, he whispered. Elena's voice was gentle. All this time. Julian exhaled shakily, staring at Karen's handwriting, and she found a way to preserve the truth. She made sure justice would come, eventually. A long silence passed before Julian carefully folded the letter again. His voice was rough with emotion. Your father was a good man. Elena's breath hitched. He protected your family the only way he could. Julian's grip tightened on the letter. At the cost of his reputation, his peace of mind. A pause. Then, I'll make it right. Elena's throat tightened. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Julian met her gaze. A public statement clearing his name, a foundation in his honor. Elena shook her head. That's not necessary. It is. His voice was firm. To me. A beat of silence, then slowly he reached for her hand. I brought you into my life for the wrong reasons, Elena. His fingers laced through hers. I wanted to punish someone. I wanted to blame you for the pain I couldn't resolve. Elena swallowed hard. And now? Julian exhaled, his grip on her tightening. Now. I don't know what this is anymore. A pause. Then, his voice, raw. But I know I don't want to let it go. Julian's voice was quiet but certain. Watching you bring music back into that empty house, seeing your determination to uncover the truth no matter the cost, he exhaled softly. I don't want a business arrangement anymore. Elena's heart pounded. What do you want? She asked. His gaze held hers, unguarded for the first time. A chance to see what this might become. Without revenge, without obligation, just us. Elena studied him, this complicated, relentless, wounded man who had once been her enemy, and now, I think I'd like that. 3 months later, Elena stood at the edge of Lake Haven, watching as the sunset painted the water in hues of gold and crimson. Behind her, the mansion's windows glowed with warm light, the sound of piano music drifting from within. A melody long forgotten, now brought to life. Julian joined her, walking without assistance now, though a slight limp remained from his injuries. The board approved it, he said. The Karen Whitmore Grant Foundation, unanimous decision. Full funding for pediatric cardiac research. Elena smiled. She would be proud. Julian's voice was softer. And your father, his name is cleared. Elena swallowed, emotion tightening her throat. He would be honored. Your mother's treatments are arranged. Luke's tuition is covered through his doctorate, if he wants it. She turned to him, shaking her head. Julian, you don't have to keep providing for my family. The contract is void. He met her gaze fully, his voice steady. This isn't about contracts. A pause. This is about the future, our future, if you want it. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Elena's breath caught. This isn't the ring I gave you before, Julian said. He opened it, revealing a simple diamond set in platinum, flanked by small sapphires. That was a business transaction. This is a question. Elena stared at the ring, her heart pounding. Blue, she murmured, like the lake. Julian smiled slightly. Like your dress, the night we danced. His voice lowered. The night I realized what was happening to me. Elena looked up at him. And what was happening? A breath. A truth long overdue. I was falling in love with my wife. He took her hand. Elena Whitmore, now that there are no debts between us, now that the truth has set us both free. His thumb brushed gently over her knuckles. Will you choose to stay? Not as part of an arrangement, but as my partner. In everything. Elena said nothing. Instead, she reached up, fingertips tracing his jaw in the same gentle caress he had once given her, on their wedding night when everything had changed. Julian closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I choose you, she whispered. Not the billionaire, not the CEO. Just you, Julian Harrington, with all your complexities, your wounds, your strengths. His breath shuddered, and then she kissed him. Their first real kiss. A kiss that carried no contracts, no conditions, no past debts. Only choice, only love. From the open doors of the estate, music continued to flow. A Debussy piece, one of Karen's favorites, now played once again. By small hands, under Harold's careful guidance, the children of the neighborhood, who came for free lessons at the newly established music school on the estate. Where grief and revenge had once ruled, music and healing now flourished. And two people, who had entered each other's lives through manipulation and pain, had found something neither expected. The truth that had set them free, and the love that would bind them together.